So we are now in the session of sustainable production design and the role of producers. We are a bit late in the schedule, but on the other hand, unfortunately, Samsung had difficulties today, so they are not joining us. So, which leaves us in safe hands of Iren Andersen, the Research Development Manager, Director of Bright Products in Norway. Warm welcome to this session. And we should be having more people coming over from the previous session, but they will fall in afterwards. So we need to start anyway. Looking forward to what you can tell us. I know you were visiting us, and I was very impressed with the ambitions and dedication that you guys have in building your products in a sustainable way, and try to also amplify on the repairability, etc. So the floor is yours, Line.
Thank you. I would like to have a presentation. So
yes.
We already tested it. Let's see if it works.
Yeah.
What happened? Can you see my screen?
Yes, now we see the presentation.
Okay, perfect. So first of all, thank you for inviting me for speaking this e-waste conference. Very important one. Like you said, Simon, I'm the head of R&D and manufacturing at Bright Products. Bright Products is, I can say, a quite small company based in Norway, and we manufacture in China. And we focus on Pico solar products, which is the small lantern in the category of like not more than 3 watt solar panel. We've been in the market for the last 10 years and are in more than 40 countries worldwide and have sold more than 3 million products. So there are some lamps around, and how do we ethically produce and design new products is how I would like to present how we work, especially on the user-centric approach. I would like to say it's not based on we have the problem and how we're going to solve it. And then it's lack of light and energy, which is the problem that we're going to solve, and how we find the best solution for that. So first, the problem, we start creating prototypes and do extensive testing, also in-house, tested with co-workers and in the laboratory, of course, with all the drop testing and all the other testing that needs to be done, but especially out in the field as well. And test of time is quite important in the sense that we have products that has been out there, and how can we improve them and do maintenance on the existing product. And how do you say that? They identified the weakest part of the product and improve that. So we have established the latest years in-house development. We have full solution or the idea. I'm talking about idea again, and the final solution with the 3 pillars, which is durability, repairability, and recyclability. That is the main platform. And then we have a framework around that with a design handbook and a sustainable handbook, and which is dynamic because it's constantly in progress as well. With material library and what is the best material for the different end users scenarios, which is all over the world as well. So we have to have back of our mind all the time, what is the best material we can use in those types of harsh environments that our products ends up. And then, of course, all the ISO certification and that has to be in place as well because of the ethical part of it. For the durability, we put that, we aligned those 3 pillars the same, but we put durability on top in the sense of prolong the lifetime of the product. The product is not better than the weakest point of the product. So you can put long-lasting mechanical parts in a product. Technical parts like batteries and the solar panel and the PCBA. But if the casing and the mechanical part doesn't align with that, that's the whole design philosophy as well, that the product is not better than the weakest part of the product. So in the pictures, you see a lamp that has been in the field for about 2 years, and then you see the button after intensive use every day wears down. So we have come up with a new solution how we can integrate that in the plastic as well, so you don't get the water ingress to ruin the technical part, for example. And also we are looking at reduced amount of parts, so the quality also of the product gets better, and then the contents improvements on existing and new products that we implement in new solutions as well. For repairability, we have now a pilot in Uganda that we're going to repair 2,000 lamps. And from that project as well, we can identify what is the weakest part of the product and take that along in new product development. But for repairability, there is some important, key factors you have to consider is no glue is going to be easy to open, but at the same time, you have to remember the quality and the durability of the product. How do you combine those 2 pillars together? And so that those 2 goes together as well. And then for the last part, we have the recyclability. And then how can we use one type of plastic in the entire product so you don't have to separate it and it goes to different places? What is the type of plastic? We are using plastic that will last as long as it can. We say up to 10 years or even longer with a repair program included. And then at the end of life, when it happens, we're looking into what is the repurposing of the product as well, because the waste streams in the places that our products ends up in sense of recycling doesn't always exist or is non-existent. And then for packaging, for the sustainability part as well, that is optimized for shipping. We don't ship air. How much products can you get into a container? But then again, they have a limitation on weight, right? Because there are some ports that can't handle that much weight. So there's all these considerations in how to develop a product. And limitation of plastic use. We don't have any plastic in the packaging at all, except from the user manual, which is paper. And then the product itself. That went a little faster than I thought. So here you see a picture of the product in the user setting. And that was it from my side.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lina. This is really inspiring to know that you're working with this. How would you say it is in the industry? Do you see a lot of competition, or do you benchmark between each other? How does it work? Since everybody wants to go more circular.
I've been in the industry for 4 years and seen a lot of changes happening. Pretty much the this last year in that way, if you look at the other competitors as well. But for us is that we have design and development in-house and have full control from the, I'm going to say, idea to the final solution, and that we can pivot and be dynamic in and have that framework that we work after and drive ourselves to be better all the time. And I would say that competition is good in that sense, that we just all have to be better. And also that we maybe have to work closer together as well to make better products, and not trying to copy each other in the sense that, oh, you're doing this, we have to do that. Instead, let's work together instead and co-share knowledge.
Sure. That's wonderful to hear. Do you also work with any innovative design universities? Now, myself, I come from the north of Sweden, where I know we have a very good interactive, and not just interactive design, also product design university. Do you have any?
We work with the School of Architecture in Oslo, and working on that, we will have a repair project with the students there. But in the sense of like research and scientific, at the moment we don't have that in place. But that is something we're looking for working on.
I'm thinking maybe challenges because the students might have totally new ways of.
It's a new way of thinking that design for repair. It's not new though. It was in the 50s, and we are taking it back now, right? So, it's very important to address that quality and repair can be aligned.
Superb.
And extend product life cycle much longer.
We need to continue into the next session, which we already had. I've seen the participants, Erik, and I saw Susanne peep in, and we're waiting for Karin Boomsma to join also. But please, Line, if you have the time, kindly stay tuned, because this is definitely, and I'm sure they also might have something to comment also. The way you had in your slides, the product is never finished, it requires constant maintenance, was a really great statement. And I mean, with that kind of a mindset, we look forward to the products basically on the market. So, and that is the need of anyone who wants to stay in business, like you said. And let's also
looking into use waste material like solar panels cut off in our products as well. We are talking about plastic and e-waste, but the solar panel problem hasn't really been solved in that way either, how to recycle it. It is possible, but it takes a lot of energy as well.
Exactly. Which raw materials can we use, and also that's very good. Lovely. We will continue in the same session, so nobody needs to move to a new session. We will just welcome in Susanne Karcher, who is working both for ACEN, in this case representing them, the African Circular Economy Network, and you're from South Africa. And then we have Erik Lindgreen, who is a researcher in circular economy and sustainability assessment from the University of Messina. And Karin Boomsma, who is the project director of Sustainable Inclusive Business Kenya. Welcome, guys, to our session on circular economy and its role in promoting resource recovery, where we can look at the material flows, the electronic waste mainly, and life cycle assessments, etc., as means to going more circular. How are you guys? All well? Yeah. Great. I'm very good. And today I brought my upcycled earrings for your sake from e-waste. So yeah, just wanted to say. So lovely. What we will do is in the program, and you let me know if that is possible. We only have half an hour, and now it's down to 20 minutes. But luckily, we also have a few less people in the group. And then directly after this comes capacity building and awareness creation. And then my idea was to have a panel discussion of both. But I think we will pretty much use this as a panel discussion slash presentation of you guys. And if you have the opportunity to stay tuned throughout the awareness half hour, I will be happy to have you there also. That would be great. But feel free, as long as you get to tell us now about what you do and how you view the circular economy and its role in promoting resource recovery. So kindly, I would like to start with Susanne Karcher. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can I get the presentation up, please, that I sent yesterday? How much time do I have exactly? I don't want to overstay my welcome.
Yeah, since I now pulled across a little bit, but I think it's going to be fine because we also have a half an hour for the Q&A panel discussion in the end. So we are now 3 people sharing on 25 minutes. So let's say you have 7 minutes. Yeah.
So can you please put the presentation up for me?
Yeah, it's on its way. It's nodding over here, so it should be coming.
Okay.
I will take a picture of you guys.
In the meantime, yeah.
In the meantime.
Yeah, interesting subject, talking about the context of the circular economy and secondary resources efficiency. So I'm just waiting for my presentation. Is it coming up now, Leon?
Maybe you can present who you are, because you don't only represent the...
Sure, absolutely. Right. So my name is Susanne Karcher. I'm a co-founder of the African Circular Economy Network. That's the one hat that I'm wearing. And the other hat, I'm obviously a normal consultant, but where I'm really heavily involved in e-waste is I was running for over 10 years a voluntary industrial association called the Southern African E-Waste Alliance, which is no more. But I'm also now currently I'm working for the World Resources Forum, and they have, with funding from Swiss SECO, we're running the Sustainable Recycling Industry Project in South Africa. And part of my job there is to assist our government to develop national e-waste policy, norms and standards. This is not my presentation. Norms and standards for operators, and also, this is also not my presentation, and then also training curriculum as well, national training curriculum. So this is what I'm doing.
Sorry. Very good. Yeah, you're...
By trade, I'm a chemical engineer, and I think that e-waste is really one of the most interesting waste streams, and specifically in the circular economy context, because I think it's a prime, what they call it, technical nutrient. If you look at all types of resources streams, I think e-waste offers the greatest potential. And, obviously, and I really would like to see my slides now, because I can talk to those.
How's it going?
Perhaps everyone else wants to introduce themselves in the meantime?
Yeah, let's introduce the rest of the panel. Karin Boomsma.
Yes, hi, my name is Karin Boomsma. I run Sustainable and Inclusive Business in Kenya, which is under the Kenyan Private Sector Alliance. We do a lot of projects, multi-stakeholder projects around the circular economy, but also climate change, biodiversity. And one of them is, for instance, the Kenyan Plastic Pact. And also building capacity in South Africa, more on education and business-to-business support. So that's my very brief introduction, and I'm quite excited to be here. Thanks, Simone. Also, I'm probably, like Susanne, has a lot of knowledge, I think, also as an engineer. So I will look at this space slightly different. So I hope my view combined with the other views will be giving a nice whole picture.
Wonderful, thank you. And Erik, welcome. Tell us who you are.
Yeah, sure. My name is Erik Roos Lindgreen. I'm from the Netherlands. And I've done my PhD at a university in Italy, University of Messina, in the measurement of circular economy and the measurement of the sustainability implications of circular solutions. And I've been working on several projects after the PhD that put this into practice. One of them has been with Footprints Africa, in which we did circularity and sustainability measurements for a small cohort of 5 businesses in different countries in Africa to have kind of a process reflection, how we can use methods, what comes out of it, and how the results can be used by those businesses. Thanks.
Now I think we are closer to having a presentation. I'm waiting to get a nod.
Is it coming up? Yay! Otherwise, I found it now on my screen as well.
It's coming.
There we go. That looks very familiar. Okay, it looks a bit scrambled though, but I'm not complaining. I'm happy what I see. All right, and then you basically just forward the presentation. This is really about talking the nuts and the bolts of resource recovery in the context of circular economy. And I want to spend first some time to really get clearer on the scope of where this sits in the wider context of the circular economy. Next. So I really like that slide, which is why I put it up twice, slightly different layouts. But, we all understand that linear economy is take, make, use, and waste. This is just going straight to the bin. And the bugbear that I have with recycling is that there's, in my opinion, too much emphasis on recycling, because if you look at this, recycling is a loop or 2 or 3, and then it still ends up in the bin. And that is something that we need to take cognizance of. So while recycling is still part of the scope of a circular economy, it's the weakest link. And in comparison, as you see on the right picture, you have so much more leverage points in a truly circular economy, because next to recycling, you have return, use, repair, and reuse. And that makes it so much more complex and interesting and retains much more value than recycling. Next. And this is just something, and I really love that picture. It's the R letter, as our colleagues from the Netherlands have developed it once. And what really needs to be put into account here is that when we talk about resource recovery, we're only moving in the two lower parts of this ladder in the first place. And only the first circle, what you see is what would actually recover functionality as the core value of resources recovered. And that must obviously come over any materials recovery. So recycling only would offer, in a classical sense, material recovery. However, we keep on mixing all those terms, and everyone, and a lot of people say, I recycle. And it's a mishmash of all of those things. And we do know that South African operators normally also do a mix of recycling and refurbishment. Just from a business perspective, it is much more viable. So we don't really have any recyclers that only dismantle. Whatever can be recovered for functionality gets practically recovered. Next. And this is also just to show another perspective of where we are, another brilliant picture that was developed by our Dutch colleagues from PBL. It's called the value hill. And what you see there is basically the 3 circular economy business models. And the one to get most excited about, but what we're hearing very little about, specifically in Africa, I think, is really the circular design models, which are really having at the heart to design products and materials from the outset to make them actually circular. This is, in my opinion, also the most powerful thing to do. Then the maintenance, that you keep things in a longer loop, keep a longer lifespan. And what we're talking about is really the value recovery model. And that is the lowest innovative kind of approach to the circular economy. Next. So I want to highlight with you now some of the work that I'm doing on this joint working group 14. It's quite exciting and it's hot and happening right now. So I wanted to share this with you because it's part of an ISO 59,000 series. So the 59,000 series, as we heard yesterday, was a colleague speaking already about TC323. And there's now also this joint working group that is actually trying to marry ISO TC323 with TC207. And also try to blend requirements from ISO 14,000 with this new series. So this whole document and what I present to you now is only in draft state. So please, this is not cast in stone. This is just to show you where we're going along in our thinking. The whole group was established in March 21, and it's under the leadership of the project leader and convener, Sonja Valdevia. So if you want any more insights, I suggest you speak to Sonja Valdevia from the World Resources Forum in Switzerland. And next, please. So what it's all about is really, as the title said, to look at principles for the recovery of secondary materials. And what is the target group? The target group is any organization. And, this is what an ISO standard is all about. You want to make it a globally applicable thing, which makes it very exciting, but at the same time, extremely difficult to define certain terms. Okay. So we spent a long time to just define what an organization is. And, what comes out is it needs to be covering any type, any size, anywhere in the world, what constitutes an organization. And that is the definition that we're saying that, it depends on the recovery process. But those, for example, are examples of organizations that would all be concerned one way or the other in preparing for material, product, or component recovery. As you see, we make also very clear distinctions between materials and components and products, and I'll show you now why. Next. What I found really interesting is also encouraging that we made a decision to not mention the W word. And the W word in our case is waste, right? Because as long as we continue to talk about waste, our language is not changing. And I believe that our language shapes our future intentions and willingness to see things differently. And only if we really start talking differently, we will see things differently, and then we will hopefully change behavior. So waste is not in this ISO document mentioned more than once to say it's not mentioned. What we're actually using is the term a non-recoverable resource, which is defined as a resource or material that is deemed not to be obtained from a resource that has already been processed or used. Okay, this is what it is all about. And the beauty about naming it that is it still has the notion of a resource. It just says it's not recoverable, but that might change in future. So I think it opens the door much, much more than to just write it off as waste, for eternity. Next. The principles, I don't know what happened here. Why are my principles not there? Okay. The principles of the ISO document is really to have respect for all the interested parties' interests, to actually assume value chain responsibility. So an organization needs to assume responsibility for all partners along the value chain. There's also clearly pointed out a responsibility towards subsistence activities. So we talk about people that actually living under a living wage and that get often exploited, specifically in the context of e-waste management. But remember, this is about secondary materials. So e-waste is part of it, but it's not exclusive to it. Okay. Safe, healthy, and equitable working conditions, protection of the environment, resource conservation, and then also system thinking in terms of triple bottom line and life cycle perspective. Yes. Next. Just cognizant of my fellow speakers, and I don't want to hog most of the time. This is quite a hectic diagram, okay? This just shows you basically when we had the discussions, what is in the scope? What is in the scope of this ISO document? Because what we agreed on it, this is about the recovery of secondary materials. While it is obviously material focused and cannot go beyond materials recovery because that's what the ISO standard binds us to, we said what we need to make sure is that it offers the ultimate opportunity to be able to recover anything that still has function in it. So we went to great lengths, and I'll share with you now a recovery pathway diagram to actually make sure that before we even talk about what's within the scope, we can make 100% sure that everything that has still recovery or functionality potential, be it as a product or be it as a component, and yes, outside of the scope of this ISO standard, but that this is actually taken care of first, which is really important. So you receive a stock of recoverable resources on the left side, you collect it, you classify it and sort it in some way, and then that is where you make this decision. Are you preparing for product and component recovery outside of the scope, or are you then preparing for material recovery, which is inside the scope? And then obviously you go from a non-destructive process, which means it leaves the integrity of a component if you have a screwdriver, or then you enter a destructive process, which would be obviously disintegrating through crushing, shredding, and so on. And the idea is then the recovery of secondary materials. And from all of those processes, you can see the red ones are the non-recoverable materials. That is what we used to call waste as secondary material, then undergoing, what's going on? The presentation is gone. Can you still see the presentation? Leon, can you please put up the presentation again? Do you want me to share my screen, rather? Now, how to figure this out, I have no idea. Where is the screen sharing button? Present. Can I do that? Present my screen. I'm just going ahead now, because otherwise we're wasting time here with technical difficulties.
I'm sorry, we lost electricity here. So
and you see my screen?
We see you, and yes, now we see yours. Now we see your presentation again. I'm sorry.
Awesome. So let me just go right back.
Yep.
Okay, right. Good. So, as I said, the non-recoverable resources coming from those non-destructive as well as destructive processes would then again go outside of the scope for final treatment, which would be either energy recovery or disposal, which we group together as final treatment. So this is really the process and activities within the scope of this ISO standard. And what the operational requirements are linked to it is that we classify and determine, and this is exciting, and I will share this with you because we developed an entire decision-making diagram of a recovery pathway that will ensure that materials are actually recovered at its highest value, that we actually see exactly if there's a quality loss or not. And I'll show you now how this works. But those are the requirements. So in the ISO standard collection of recoverable resources, we talk about facilitating return and as a separate stream, sorting, that it has to be sorted according to an identified attribute at its highest quality, material recovery processing, that depollution is a mandatory thing to do, and routing it then for final treatment, whatever is non-recoverable resource, that from a logistics perspective, adequate methods must be in place to prevent environmental human harm, and also a resource management plan. So an organization, no matter how small you are, should make a plan that identifies opportunities to optimize or reduce the resource and energy use of your organization. And now this is something I want to share with you, which recently has just been completed. So this is brand new stuff of how we try to actually unpack a recovery pathway that really clearly defines what to do. This is a decision-making diagram. So if you would be a recycler now, right, and you would now receive a load of electronic waste, this is the kind of decision-making program that you would have to do. You would look at the questions. Are the recoverable resources collected specifically for product recovery? Yes, go to step 2. No, Ask further. Are the recoverable resources collected as separate product types? Yes. No. Go further. Are the recoverable resources collected as mixed product type? And so you go down until are the recoverable resources collected as separate material types? And then the question again, are they mixed or are they separate material types? So this is already a very clear distinction of what you receive, which then informs an even more complicated diagram, because now if you look at, remember step 2, that would be when you have actually recovered products of sorts, right? How would you break this down in step 2 and 3 to figure out where they go? So this is a whole testing that would be outside of the scope. You can see the process out of scope are the ones that have the dotted lines. But what it yields is a very clear pathway how you actually derive at material recovery. So what material recovery is and what it's not. So if it's component recovery, it's out of the scope because it's functional still. Product recovery, out of scope, and so on. Now we're just following the material recovery, okay? So now, and that makes it really interesting, is this is now only all types of materials. So we are now only in the scope of this ISO standard, which is concerned with secondary materials recovery, right? But now we're asking really questions, which no one has asked before. Can the material be recycled into material with the same physical chemical properties? So this would be a clear recycling, right? So then you would say, okay, that is a material recovery as everything else, but it's recovered with the original physical chemical properties. This is first prize. This is, for example, your bottle-to-bottle recycling when it comes to PET bottles. You know, it comes back as a bottle. This is exactly the highest value of materials recovery that you can look at. If that's not the case, can the material be recycled with physical chemical properties that are nearly close? Now, this is now where we enter the kind of downcycling territory, okay? So that would be a downcycling. So it is close, but not identical, okay? And then the third one is far removed from the regional one. This is very much the domain of beneficiation. You know, when e-waste plastic comes back as a roof tile, that is beneficiation. It has a completely different purpose, different physical and chemical properties. And what I'm still not happy is you can still read the same thing here on the bottom. Material recovered providing another function. What we will change here will be material recovered close to providing, far from providing another function and close to providing the original function. Then you have actually distinguished 3 different qualities of secondary materials recovery, which I think is really exciting. And then the final distinction is obviously resources that you can't recover as the material. You ask the final question, is there calorific value contained? And if yes, then energy recovery, if no, disposal. And I think this is just a really exciting kind of novel concept that I thought you might find interesting to learn about. So what else is happening in South Africa? This is what I mentioned already, and you can talk to me directly here. With the SHRI project that I'm managing, we have a first draft of a national e-waste policy. We have a first draft of norms and standards for operators. So we have a tier-based system. We looked very much at Ghana's technical guidelines. We looked at Senelec. We looked at R2 at Eastern, and we made our own little mixture out of all of those, for South Africa. This is all work in progress. And also national e-waste training curriculum. We have now submitted an outline for a We Entrepreneur, which is, I think, very exciting because it is actually pitched in a modular fashion on the level of an informal sector. So people would first in a module learn how to collect and sort. Then they can choose to have a second model where they would learn to dismantle and depollute. And there would be a final model that would actually teach business skills. So if they undergo all those 3 models, which starts out on NQF2, they would actually come out with a certification in future in South Africa as a We Entrepreneur. And I think this is the type of hands-on qualification packages that we need to make in Africa. And then we also work on an asset release toolkit for the government. EPR has started up. You heard about it yesterday, and 5 PROs are already in space to look at e-waste. And that is it from my side. Thank you so much for your time and interest.
Wow, Susanne, this is amazing. This is the kind of details that we need, what you are now
Okay.
investigating and researching for and putting down. Thank you for showing the work that you're doing right now, and also the other things. We need to listen to the others first also, and then we can discuss a little bit more. Now we have absolutely no time, pretty much, but let me see. Since I don't have two screens right now, I need to look at one screen, so it became a little bit too small here. We have passed 5 minutes into the next session of awareness creation, but we will continue because I'm thinking all of this needs to be also disseminated so that more players around and also entrepreneurs will know about the opportunities that are becoming reality now with the different curriculums and all of this. So very good. I wanted to hand over the floor to Erik, Roos Lindgreen from the University of Messina. And now, Erik, I know you had short time before, but now you have even less. So, but you work with measurements, structures, and tools for circularity. Kindly give us an insight on what you do, and then we will have to take the longer versions on request. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are very interested. The floor is yours, Erik.
Thank you very much, Simone. And that's no problem at all. I'll try to keep it short but sweet. Just focus on some of the highlights. I have my presentation right here, so I'll share that now. Please let me know as soon as it becomes visible. Is this all right for you to see? Can you all see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. I'll just take off. I have a bit more slides than I'm able to present now, but I'll focus on the most important. And I think that is making a link to the previous presentation by Susanne, which I think is about the diversity of circular economy strategies and the diversity of end-of-life options if we talk about electronic waste. So my name is Erik. I'm working at the University of Messina as a subject matter expert in circular economy sustainability management, and I'm also working as a consultant for various projects related to the measurement of circular economy. So let's focus on measuring that. I also want to say a little bit about life cycle assessment and material rarity assessments, but if you're interested in that, I'll show you my email at the end, so you can have the more elaborate version of this presentation. I think the first important point, and we already heard this before, is that circular economy means many different things to many different people. And you see that in metrics as well. You see that there's as many circular economy metrics as there are definitions. And I'm also a big fan of these R-ladder categorizations, for instance, that really provide insight into all these different shapes and flavors of strategies that there are. But there's been papers in academic literature that define more than 100, and I think that was already 5 years ago, definitions of what circular economy is. And this is then very much connected to what we just heard. This is actually taken from a presentation by the ISO working group on defining circular economy measurement last year, I believe, at the World Resources Forum. And they presented this huge, very impressive overview of all these circular economy indicators that are out there. And ISO already finds over 200 categories of indicators, which contains then 1,400 sub-indicators. So you can imagine how extensive and diverse this universe is. So that's why we were thinking about, well, let's think about what we want circular economy to be and base our metrics on that. And that comes from the idea that not every circular economy strategy delivers its promised impact. And an example is recycling processes that consume a lot of energy, for instance, or recirculating materials but needing a lot of transport to do so. And I think you can think of many other examples in which a certain strategy or solution is part of the circular economy, but we should still assess whether it actually has the impacts that we want to achieve. So for that, That was actually part of my PhD, and I worked together with my colleagues on designing a framework to do so, to really measure these impacts, a framework that's feasible for companies, but also scientifically based and accurately able to quantify these impacts. Way too much to discuss now, but I think two elements there are quite important. That we want to base it on flows of materials, and that we want to use methods and tools that have been in development, under development for decades. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just trying to make sense of the methods that we already have. And then, as I briefly mentioned before in the introduction, we applied this framework with Footprints Africa, a think tank NGO working in from Ghana, but active in many African countries to investigate, among other things, circular economy businesses and how they can be valorized as they're the businesses of the future. And one of those businesses is We Center in Kenya. We work together very closely. I think it started in February, April until June, more or less, to be able to apply metrics to the question, how circular is the We Center? And what kind of methods can we use for that? Technical story. I won't go into the method that we actually used. It's by the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. But it's basically, and I think there's some overlap with what we just saw, an investigation into the circularity of the inflow and outflow of materials through a company. And of course, as with any measurement work, you run into challenges of data availability. Fortunately, with We Center, there was plenty of data available, but we also see that the method was more geared towards companies that are still linear, manufacturing companies, for instance. So that's something that I wanted to shed some light on in this presentation, and also hear from others whether they share this. To be able to calculate circular economy metrics, we need more data. I think that's something important. And we need clearer language on what it means when we say recycling, processing, etc. And I really found it very fascinating to see the presentation before to help shape this language and not use the word waste, for instance, and really find more structured ways of communicating what happens with products and materials at the end of life. And for that, we can use data as well. We can use methods like the one we used, and then use information on, for example, materials that are returned to the company, or materials of which the lifespan is extended, of simply the avoided amount of extracted raw materials, to be able to put some metrics to the businesses that we want to assess. Another challenge specifically to this case, and perhaps more widely applicable, is that there's a lack of data on recyclability for different electronic appliances. And I think everyone working in the field has experience with the immense complexity in terms of material composition that these appliances are subject to. So that is something that we would need more data on, what technologies are available to process these appliances. Then, of course, also where do they end up? That's something that's also to some extent undocumented and sometimes informal. And then hopefully at some point we can move to an approach in which we don't only say something about the circulation of resource flows, but also on the actual impacts of circulating them. And that would mean, for example, saying something about carbon emissions going up into the air, pollution going up into the soils or into our water or also up into the air, etc. There's a whole long list of life cycle assessment indicators that we can then apply to our circular solutions. That is something for the future, and I think that's all for now from my side.
Thank you so
happy
much,
to,
Erik.
No problem at all. And let me know, please, if you have any questions. I think my email address, I don't know if we have a chat today. Otherwise, I would put it in there.
They're
Otherwise, I will.
actually in the lounge as a speaker. They should be able to connect with you through this platform and send you a message. Okay. But of course, for anyone who wants Erik's contacts or anything, just reach out to me if you can't find him directly, and I will be happy to provide. So we need to hear Karin before we leave this session when it comes to circularity, because now we've heard very detailed on measurements, which is so much needed, on standardization and that work that Susanne is doing as well. Karin, you please enlighten us from your perspective, what you've seen so far here in Kenya, but Africa also as a whole, when it comes to circularity and the resource management development.
Thank you very much. Let me try and share my screen very briefly. I'm not
We
sure
are
what you
now
see
15
now.
minutes into the next session, which is still fun.
I think there's a
utilize the
lot.
panel discussion timing, but just
You see a lot of different things, but not my
and
screen,
now you
I
click
think.
on your change on the first.
But
There you go, that one.
do you see this?
Yep,
Okay, I can't see you anymore, but let us see.
that's
Okay.
perfect.
Good. So, from my perspective, and obviously, maybe a bit more broader than specifically only for the circularity of material flows that come out of electronic devices. I think we've addressed already the circular economy and what it entails and how it works or how we can actually define it. But I thought just very brief about how it systematically works, because I think that's interesting to look at as we see that there's different material streams in different products and and they are part of different value streams even and value chains. So how are we actually going to decouple the economic activity from consumption and the resources? So if we then look at the design of electronic products, the make and the use, there is quite a lot of systematic change required to actually shift. And it ties in nicely with the other presentations, I think, as well, where you really see like we might not be able to recycle. Where is recycling now? It might change in the future. And that all depends on how everyone in the ecosystem responds to the transition to a circular economy. And that transition is quite a transformation. So what we see is very key in approaching this process is creativity and innovation. So not only do we need to understand materials and why we use them and why we design them as we do, and how can we do that differently in terms of a longer lifespan or bringing it back in the loop, but it requires a complete creative and innovative thinking, also, for instance, on business models. So not only on design and material choices, but actually how we share products and services with each other and what kind of role it plays in our society. So that's quite a big shift, because even when we design for recyclability or design for reuse or design for durability, it can be supported and enabled by a completely different business model, for instance, and also reverse logistics. And this mindset is not only applicable to the people that produce it, the manufacturers, but also brand owners, the government with supporting policies, as well as consumers. Just a quick look. So what we have, or what we always say, we have a lot of good things in Africa. We're very resilient, we're agile, we are early adapters, we are innovators, we're very young, there's a massive and big population, there's a lot of space, there is a lot of potential in Africa for Africa. We can still leapfrog because we haven't made all the mistakes or haven't set up systems as they are maybe in the Western world currently present. So benefiting from no systems yet is great because we can leapfrog. Now we have a few issues. So we have a lack of infrastructure, which is a challenge. Sometimes a lack of skills in this circular economy space. We have trade agreements that are not always beneficial. They bring us a lot of end-of-life products into Africa, while we can't really deal with it because we don't have the infrastructure to bring them back into the loop, and we can't even manage the waste. There is an issue with perception on the African continent from abroad, I would say, from outside the continent. There's a lot of consumerism in the West, which we do not experience yet in Africa, and yet we need to deal with it. There's a lot of bad design and bad production, very cheaply produced with cheap labor and very bad for the environment. And then there's needs. So we really need to talk about access to reliable energy and access to digital devices and digital platforms to actually close the gaps, equality and inclusion. So I just wanted to sort of give a very brief sketch on where we are in this space and what then system thinking and electronic devices, digitalization, what does it mean for our continent? The circular economy and its role in promoting resource recovery, what are the key contributors and what's really important? So access and inclusivity is one, because we can say how we need to deal with it, etc. But if the majority of our population doesn't actually have fair access to reliable internet, reliable electricity, then we can talk about inclusivity and leaving no one behind, but it's not really a fair case. We need to talk about design and changing business models, so service instead of products, because that will change ownership. So if you see that a product that you sell to people remains yours, you will take care of it better, but also you're benefiting from materials that are long-lasting, because if you get it back and then you rent it out again, or it's on consignment, or it's on whatever business model it is, only use and maintenance plan, then you are benefiting as a company for materials that are long-lasting, because your services are relevant and not the products. So that's one of the aspects that is really interesting to see, and we see it happening with HP printers, for instance, that are being rented out, and the quality of the plastic and the quality of material, if it would last longer, it would benefit the company. The second thing is you get a lot of information back. So the minute you have a service model, you get information back of what your customers want, and how and where the wear and tear is. And secondly, you have a long-lasting relationship with consumers. So there's a lot of benefits in that. And there's a sense of responsibility towards resources, and that's what we're talking about. EPRs plays a big role and can play a big role, and that's actually linked to these kind of elements. If you are responsible for recovery of components or the materials that you produce or use, you will definitely take a different approach towards resource efficiency and resource recovery. It's crucial to have awareness and platforms, because these are all interlinked, and we need collaboration for that as well, because we need to know where materials are and how they're being used, in what state they are, and how they can be brought back or stay into the loop.
Perfect.
I will try and keep...
Yeah, timekeeping. Exactly. It's my...
Let's not dive into all the system thinking, but system thinking is different story for a different day, I would say. Let me close this and stop sharing. Yeah. So this was in brief a view from maybe a broader perspective, where is circularity playing a role in resource recovery.
Thank you so much, Karin, and I hate to stress us with this, but thank you all for really great insights. We are scratching the surface, as said here, but that is also the purpose of this conference, to actually bring people and knowledge together, to reach out and make us available for more people, because that was actually one of my questions now. We are doing all these good things. We are developing systems. We are looking at different patterns, etc. How do we get to know? How do we sense on this and sensitize people the opportunities of circularity, where we also see the business models being financially stable? And one way, and I will let Susanne do the marketing for that event coming up, but for sure, maybe we can have a short one sentence from each and every one of you as a closing of this, talking about how do we now include more in people and organizations and governments into this discussion. So kindly, Susanne, one sentence, and then Erik, and then Karin. And Line, you're still here. I would love to hear one sentence from
Yeah, I
you.
think the subject on e-waste and secondary materials recovery is really hotting up now. Urban mining is real. We need to make sure we preserve our resources. We see additional pressure coming from Europe wanting our resources too. I'm looking forward to the World Circular Economy Forum in December, where we will also have an acceleration session just on e-waste. And I think some of my colleagues are there as well. And I look forward to that. And hopefully we can continue discussions. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and to hear all these amazing stories and works. I think something that really struck me from this session is the need to harmonize language, and I think that is very relevant to measurement as well. If we say we want to improve, if we say we want to move to more sustainable development, let's say, we will need to have the language to say what that means before we can actually start measuring. So that is something that I took away from today, and thanks again.
Thank you
Karin?
very much. Yes. I think it's interesting to hear that there's so much progress on the knowledge and the insights we have. And yes, there is need for alignment on language and action, and I think ways of collaboration. But I also think if we, like when we had those conversations and conferences 5 years ago, Simone, it's a very different story. People were still exploring what all those kind of things would mean, and how could we actually bring initiatives together, or how are they actually part of an economy rather. So I think it's also great to see how much progress there's being made and how much knowledge there is, and how it's being shared. So I'm also looking forward to the World Circular Economy Forum. So we meet all there again, and those are actually platforms where we share that and define roadmaps together for the next steps. So I'm excited about that. Thank you all for a very good contribution.
Thank you, Karin, and thank you, Erik. Thank you, Susanne. Lina disappeared, so we will quickly move everyone over to the next session, which is capacity building, awareness creation in large and in personal, small scale, which is needed, all of it. So thank you so much, and we move over.